Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you all for making it through to the panel discussion. This is just going to be an informal chat. We're going to spend probably the first 50 odd minutes having a discussion amongst ourselves, and then we can open it up to the rest of the room for a bit of a Q&A. And by that time, hopefully we have sandwiches and we can all have a bit of a feed and get to know each other. 50. 50.
Putting us to work, huh?
I haven't taken out the props yet. All right, so I'm going to kick us off with some introductions. Just going to tell you a bit about someone from the panel and then let them take it from there. So why don't we start with you, Matt? So Matt Rosenfeld is the head of Westchester Prep. With us with TutorCruncher for several years now, centres in Pleasantville, Armonk, Scarsdale, a few more that I'm forgetting. Chappaqua, I always forget Chappaqua. Do you want to introduce yourself, Matt?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Matt Rosenfeld, like Fionn said, with Westchester Prep. Long-time loyal customer of TutorCruncher. If any prospective customers have any questions. We run 4 tutoring centers in Westchester County, work mostly with public school students. We also serve in district in a couple of lower income districts that are struggling to keep up. We run programs both with students who have failed the Regents tests of many varieties and need to retake, and also with SAT and ACT prep, trying to give access to some students who otherwise wouldn't have access. And then I'd say the bulk of our business is definitely working with students who are of some level of means and are looking, I would say, fairly high achieving students. And at least when we got started, a lot of and I think still to this day, a lot of our messaging and getting back to values, as we were talking earlier, really has been about like managing stress. We understand, a lot of our students have a great deal of stress on them, and working with families and students closely to help manage their stress and improve outcomes. And then just most recently, a couple years ago, we launched the college advising service as well. Seems like everybody's on that bandwagon, and happy to talk about that, and really excited for the chat today.
Fantastic, thank you, Matt. So next up we have Morris Kishk, who is one of the first clients that I signed onto DC when I joined up about 4 years ago. So co-founder of Revolution Tutors with Ariel Cohen, who unfortunately couldn't make it along today. But yeah, lots of irons in the fire, always. Always an exciting call that you have with Ariel and Morris, because they have 50 plans about what they want to implement. So yeah, hopefully we hear about some of those today. Do you want to introduce yourself, Morris?
Yeah, thank you for having us. Nice to see all of you. And we love TutorCruncher, great service, obviously. Before we were using it, I don't know what we were doing. We were a mess. I don't know how we were collecting money. My partner Ariel had like spreadsheets, and I tried to explain to him that something was wrong and we couldn't properly grow this way. And then, I don't know, we had a great call, and so that's been great. We started as a test prep company. I was actually in college trying to pay rent for my father. Wasn't want to help me, so he wanted me to live at home, and I went to NYU, and I told him, yeah, I'll pay for the rent, don't worry. And then he came to me, he said, Morris, all right, $15,000, that's the rent. And I had nothing. I was so I said my bar mitzvah money, something like that. And then so we started teaching SAT in one of our local communities. And it was just something that was fun. I always thought I was going to go to law school. I could tell you more of my backstory. But bottom line is that grew, and that was fun. And so until maybe 3 years ago, that's what we did. We did test prep and tutoring. When COVID hit and, already the test optional kind of stuff was in the air, I always panic first. Like, I just take the full panic. So I assumed all the business was gone and that we shouldn't touch SAT at all anymore. It's been surprisingly more resilient than I expected. People still paying for tutoring even though they don't submit scores. We could talk more about that. But we pivoted very drastically into obviously college guidance being a very big avenue for us, but into working with schools and doing consulting for schools. And in New York, a lot of funds have been given to private schools, whether it was title funding, CARES funding, now EANS funding. So figuring out what are our assets and what are the schools, what are the needs, what are the current needs, and so pushing in that direction. And we could talk about that kind of stuff. But nice to meet all of you.
Fantastic. Great to have you, Morris. So we go next to Irvi Keown, who's the CEO of TestRocker, also working with TC for quite a few years now. I probably haven't had a ton of calls between ourselves. I mostly dealt with Keith, your colleague, earlier on, but quiet and hardworking, and like you just have it on the background. So yeah.
Hi, this is awkward. So I'm Irvi. I am co-founder and CEO at TestRocker. We started TestRocker 10 years ago. As it started as a family business. My mom has been an educator for 20. At this point, probably 27. I keep saying 20, but the time has passed. So probably like 30 years. I don't even know. And she wanted to, she was doing one-on-one private tutoring overseas. We used to live in Singapore. And she wanted to reach more students. So I was working in advertising in New York City at the time. And I did a lot of digital. I was working in digital marketing, digital production. And I decided to quit my job and start this full time and really take that private tutoring experience, but create a standardized version of it so that students can access it from all over the world. So we now have students in 40 countries who use our platform. It is completely online. So we've been trying to tell people that this can work for 10 years. And the last couple of years, people are like, oh, we need something online. So it is, it's now being adopted the way we dreamt from the beginning. We obviously have a live component as well, where students come into a la carte, like math or English classes as they need. We're focused mostly on, most of our business comes from test prep, but our focus is fixing the fundamentals before going into like test taking strategies and stuff. So when you work with your mom and also an educator, there are no shortcuts, so strategies don't cut it. So we have to actually teach everything. So teaching through video-based learning. Our program has 2,000 SAT questions with 2,000 SAT video explanations, plus all the concepts are taught through video. And then students come to our live classes as well, but everything is personalized to every student. So we have small group and one-on-one. And yeah, I think it's exciting to be here. We also have a college access component where we work in charter schools, public schools, not just in New York, but kind of all over the country. College access is more a US-based thing. And we have a full business in India as well. So that's what we do. Nice to meet you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Irvi. And yeah, last but not least, we have Sam Slater, who's the CEO of A-List Education. So TutorCruncher works with A-List's sister company in a separate context, but A-List themselves are not only a tuition company over here, but also involved with Testive, which is a software to providers like yourselves. But I'll let Sam go into more of the details about that. Do you want to kick us off?
Yes, I do. So I hear Tutor Country is really good, right? Everyone's into it here.
Apparently, Sam. I'm
hearing a lot of good things about Tutor Country. So I'm Sam. I'm actually here from Florida, although I grew up in New York, so I'm kind of cold with this weather. It's, I need the coat. But I'm running, I run A-List Education. I've had a long career in test prep, which is weird to say when you grow up as a kid. You don't think, I can't wait to work as a tutor for SAT. I went to school to be an accountant, but surprisingly not that exciting, so I changed careers. I worked at Kaplan for about 10 years. I then came to A-List. And A-List does a lot of really great things. So we are primarily a test prep company. We do college advising as well. We do about 50% of our work retail, so we work with fairly wealthy clients, and then half of our business is institutional clients. Normally, like New York City DOE is the big chunk of that. So what's great about us is we do a lot of work to help the well-off clients, but we help a lot of people that would never get the kind of education that we can then provide. We're actually expanding this service into what we're calling pathway programs through the Dick Barnett Foundation, where we're working with kids from 9th grade all the way to their freshman year of college, providing them with not just academic support, but college advising, test prep. We just had our first class finished for 9th grade. It's super exciting. They're so awesome. We got to take them to a Knicks game, which was fun too for me as a New Yorker. But it's really great, and I'm excited to talk with all of you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Perfect. Definitely little notes in everybody's introductions that I'm going to be needling back into later on. But I'm going to start off with softball. So, now versus 2.5 years ago, where are you at? What's happened? So, your business now versus 2.5 years ago, what have been the big changes? Are you reverting back to normal? Are you never going there again? Whoever wants to, anyone, you want to jump in on it?
Last but not least, but first this time, maybe?
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I would say right before the pandemic, the pendulum was very heavy in-person everything. Pandemic happens, pendulum swings all the way back. Everything is online. And now we're like kind of trying to reverse back, but there is a good middle ground that we're trying to keep people at, because virtual education is great. It allows us to have the best possible teacher for somebody in remote areas. I think we also lean on remote because our teachers don't want to travel as much as they can. They want to stay at home, but the business has mostly bounced back from where it was. We had like a leaner period mid-pandemic, but at this point, our schools are back spending the way they were spending before. I think you had said you thought SAT might shift, but then it came back. It's been the same for us too, like more resilient than I imagined it would be. So mostly where it was before, with the pendulum continuing to swing.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. Anyone else?
Sure. Yeah, why not? Yeah. All right. 5-0, right? All right. Yeah, no, I think similar kind of pendulum. Staffing's tricky because I think a lot of our staff got used to being remote, and that's gotten tricky kind of getting everybody back in the office. But students, I think, are burned out by Zoom school, and I've certainly found just a drop-off in terms of, how effective it like at first when everybody was remote and that was the only way to learn, I think it was almost refreshing for students to have one-on-one support virtually versus, being in a group where they can shut their camera off. But now I think the pendulum's really swung back to being in person. The biggest shift I've seen, though, is just the underlying skills that our students are coming in with. So I think that a year plus of virtual learning really took its toll, and a lot of people kind of tried to bury their heads in the sand on it. And a lot of teachers just handed out A's like candy. And it's really like a lot of parents and students are struggling with the sort of shock of expectations now kind of coming back. And there's just a lot of parents who are like, wait, I don't understand. My student had all A's last year. Why the C's and D's right now? Why are we struggling so much? So, yeah, I don't know if you guys have had similar experience, but.
Yeah, I think for us, so since we were online from the beginning, 10 years ago, it was, people obviously adopted online learning more and things like that. I think what it's given us is the opportunity to deliver really personalized learning, right? So we have the ability now, because we are online and we're providing live classes, we have 5 students maximum in a class. In person, that becomes really, really hard to do. So then, private is cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So for $599, you can now come to a class and have maximum of 5 students in a class. And that's our magic number. We tried 6. Our tutors were like, can't do it. I'm falling apart. But 5 works. So also the flexibility for students. Like every single student we talk to is the busiest student in the world. Like they have so much going on. So everybody's scheduling classes at 7 p.m. or later. So our small group classes are 5 to 7 Eastern and then 7 to 9. And then we have the ability to have weekend classes, all of that. The other opportunity it's given us is to hire people anywhere, right? So it's really helped us, because before we were doing in-person stuff and we're limited to this area, and lucky for us, there's a lot of talent here. But now we've been able to hire tutors at a slightly lower cost in different parts of the country, which is nice as well. And deliver on that, and different time zones. So we have clients coming to us now because we're online. We have students coming to us from, Idaho and Hawaii and Alaska and like all over the place. So we're not limited to one place, which is helping our business model quite a bit. And yeah, I think just the ability to deliver on what the students need. And then I think people have gotten used to tracking and data and things like that. So we're not mindlessly tracking data, but we use our data tracking to push students to harder levels, to push students to actually log on. So, when you're in person, you're like, did you do your homework? Yeah, I did my homework. Sure. And then it's just a he said, she said thing. With us, we're like, well, based on the login data and all of this, like, you didn't complete what was done. At the end of every class, the tutor writes notes, presses submit, it goes to the parent's phone, like right away. So in a world where people are kind of obsessed with that instant, like what's happening today, obviously parents are like, did my kid's score go up by 100 points today? It's like, not today, but in a few days maybe. So yeah, it's really helped our delivery model from that perspective. It's kind of opened things up for us personally. It was very stressful March 2020. That's for sure. We lost a lot of our clients, our in-person stuff, a lot of our charter schools where we're actually doing really good work and making a difference. We lost a lot of that, and it was very, very difficult, and we didn't know if it would come out, but here we are.
Yeah, makes sense. Mars?
Yeah, a quick show of hand, just so I have a sense. How many of you guys do test prep, like SAT, ACT prep, or Regents prep, or something like that? All of you. All right, so like we've been saying, I found the business to be more resilient than I thought. People still signing up, calling us. They want to study for the SAT. My kid needs to study for the SAT. But at the end of the year, when it comes to submit scores, of the people that paid us for the service, at 20% are submitting, I think. I'm seeing students get into school. At the end of the day now, I want to go to this school. Okay, so then you're not going to send your score, so why would they? So to me, even though maybe from a revenue perspective it's there, I still assume it's gone. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm not pouring resources into building that business or resurrecting it. They study and then they find that it's not so easy to increase their score, and they start realizing towards senior year. So to me, how many years of that could go on before everyone's like, wait, there's really no point in this? That's how I see it. Now, I don't know, maybe the schools start saying they require it again, and it's fair. Maybe people start to see, you said, expectations coming back. Like, I think there's been a whole thing. We don't want to put any expectations on them. They're stressed enough, but maybe schools start to say, no, tests are coming back. Regents, which used to be a big part of our business, we ran this program since I was a kid. We used to have hundreds of students coming into our center. This year, I tried to call the kids about Regents. They're like, nah, I don't know what this is. I'm like, no, it's a big test. You got to study for it, don't you know? They're like, yeah, we have final. It's a final, right? It's a final at the end of the year, So maybe this year everyone fails, and then we start getting calls the next year. They're not even taking it. Right, so that's a maybe they start, man. I don't know what's going to happen, but to me, we built out other streams. I'm still looking at this other part of the business, and we're running it because it's there, and I'm not going to walk away from it, but I'm not super bullish on it. And so the things that I've pivoted towards is, so the day the pandemic hit, and it was the March SAT, I was going to go take the SAT with the kids, and I give out a hat if anyone beats me on the test. I was so excited, and then it gets canceled, and no one even goes in, and I start to realize, oh my God, I'm screwed. This is it already. The SAT was on thin ice. Who's going to sign up for next year? So we were already doing a little computer science education. So I started looking at the teachers, and they're all trying to teach on Zoom, and they don't know what's going on. So we started running free professional developments for the schools on how to use technology. And we did that for months. And it was 100 teachers, 200 teachers coming, and slowly I shoved myself into that hole. And now we do a lot of professional development, data work. The clients, like sounds like what yours are these institutions, which are bigger anyway. It's easier. Their needs change, but I could come up with products at a rate that fits the change in their needs, and it's worthwhile too. And so that's kind of where I am. The hiring remote's unbelievable. I love it. We have people all over the country. You get great people, very passionate. I like connecting tutors remotely, but like you guys are saying, so students are like, some are over that. But when it comes to like college guidance, we're remote. Even if someone's down the block, I don't think they need to come. They don't need to come. They don't need to come in. And so I don't know. I think things change. They're going to change somewhat permanently, and I don't know that there's looking back. But
So building on what Matt was saying as well, and you've touched on it too. Assuming now we're in a place of catch-up where people have realized how far behind they fell, and they didn't know that before, and now you've got to bring them back up to level. How does that change the approach that your companies are taking, whether that's with like scheduling and delivery? Are you offering more hours per week, for example, or are you changing the kind of marketing that you're coming out with when you speak to parents about like, oh, it's not about getting your kids into Harvard anymore, it's about getting your kids back to, level? Has that affected your businesses? Are you factoring that in?
I go. Okay. For us, like we always start with a baseline, right? So families come to us sixth grade and up, essentially, and we start with a baseline. And if the starting score, and we're not just looking at the score, we're also looking at fundamental understanding of concepts of math and English. So if a student is particularly behind before they get started, we have programs that are foundational in nature. So we recommend the correct path. So for us, it goes back to values or whatever it is, but we're trying to get outcomes beyond just that test score. We're trying to help these students get college ready, right? So for us, if they've purchased SAT prep, but they're not ready for SAT prep, we figure out, do they need the PSAT program? And again, for us, it's just a switch of a button. So we have all these programs ready to go, lined up. Do they need PSAT prep? Do they need to go back further to 7th and 8th grade math and English foundations? Depending on that, we turn on and off the correct topic or module or whatever it is that they need. But it has to be done at the beginning. And I think for families, they're coming to us pretty panicked because college counselors don't really talk to them. Their high school college counselors don't really talk to them until second semester of their 11th grade. But that's way too late, right? This process starts earlier. So we're always the first people who they talk to, and they're kind of like puppies. They're just help. And they have and I have children. I think, one of my 2 children is brilliant. The other one, I told them, walked into a wall twice yesterday. But I would say oh my God, okay. I would say for me, you have high expectations and high hopes for your children, so you have to understand that, but you also have to set the expectations correctly. Look at the data and say, okay, you want to send your children to Harvard, but your child is currently sitting at, a much lower stage than Harvard level right now. So what do we need to do? And let's set a plan and let's see if that's even realistic, right? We offer a score guarantee on our programs. So we say guaranteed you're going to get this. If you do the work that we tell you to, come to the classes that we're telling you to, we have the data. So there's no he said, she said thing. And that's it. So we want to make sure that we meet that promise. So if that means a little extra work for us, we do it.
So it's kind of like Rabbi Beda was talking about earlier, focusing on values rather than outcomes necessarily. Yeah. And is that, anyone else have any points on that they'd chip in?
I'll say a couple of things. So one thing I've noticed related to this is we're getting calls much younger than we used to. We've had a lot of early 9th grade, 8th grade talking about test preparation, which, hey, good, right? But it's been surprising because we had historically been 10th, we tend to be toward the end. So the earlier calls have been better, and it's allowed us to set up plans that are better for these kids that have been struggling. So we've seen that a lot. The thing that helps us is sort of similar to what she has. Our platform is we take a diagnostic test, and then it immediately diagnoses where they are at any given point and gives you the right size questions. So we utilize that heavily to make sure that we are working with kids at the right place. But even more important than that, it's about setting proper expectations with the kids after the diagnostic. So a lot of times what we'll do is before we even sign someone up, we have them take a test, we understand where they are, and we make sure we have a realistic conversation with the parents on what their goals are, what it's going to take to get there. And so that's what we're starting to see.
Cool. Yeah, anyone else? Or
Yeah, sure.
I can move on as well.
Yeah, why not? I think, the conversation has shifted a bit. I think from just the outcome to something more holistic, where whether, I think we're still sort of using the SATs and ACTs, but almost like as a proxy right now for like the underlying skills. And with the understanding that it's more about building those skills. And I think that's why similarly, like we are starting like to see students coming in younger and younger and focusing more on just holistic academic support, rather than, than just test prep. I think one thing that at least where, in Westchester County, and I'm sure we're not the only place, is the grade inflation has sort of gotten like wildly out of control and exacerbated by COVID. So, something's definitely going to have to give, right? I completely agree. Like one of, just to give an example, what the guy who runs our college advising program will often tell people this, like we'll have a call, student comes in, says, okay, I got a 3.9 GPA, going to, Byram Hills High School, which is, one of the top public schools in the country. And he says, okay, well, I hate to break it to you, but your, son or daughter's in the bottom third of the class, right? 3.9, bottom third of the class. All right, what's going on here, right? So, a 4.0 just doesn't mean what it used to. So you need something else. Now, a lot of our focus has definitely been on building like the whole, resume of the student with the college advising program. But, I think a lot of students are still trying to fill that niche with tests, and that's why it's probably hung in there a little bit. But, either the grade inflation is going to have to come down, or we're going to need a reintroduction of tests, or something's going to have to shift, out of where we are right now, I think.
You welcome to come in on that, Morris. I can go on as well. Yep. So this actually leads us on relatively well. One of the themes I wanted to kind of come to was the perceptions of tutoring as an industry, specifically within New York, but also generally. And while we're talking about foundational work after COVID and kids who've fallen behind, one of the big, widely reported themes of the pandemic was not only that kids are falling behind, but that the kids who are already behind have fallen behind much more, and then the kids who weren't that behind are roughly where they were. So there's a widening gap between the worst educational attainment and the best. And I don't know, just your general thoughts on what the industry should be, how the industry should be responding to that, how it's presented to you and your businesses. Yeah, Sam?
I like talking first. So I think the industry needs to continue doing what it's been doing, which is filling those gaps. Like, that's why this industry exists. One of the programs we started, I mentioned this sort of briefly, was the Pathway programs. It's built specifically for this kind of need. It wasn't built with the idea of COVID and learning loss, but kids that were not getting the kind of education they needed at schools have a support system all the way through high school that is funded by the foundation that we work with, but other foundations, other rich sponsors, to give those kids the prep they need to actually get into college and be effective. So things like that, I think, are important. I think, Morris, you'd mentioned it. We're seeing a lot more institutional business just generally. There seems to be a lot of interest in helping the kids. Like, it's been clearly identified that kids are behind, but there is a lot of interest in supporting them. And so we lean in with foundations, but we lean in with other schools and institutions that can support. And that makes it's easier for us to run because it's like financially I know what I'm going to get and I know we can prepare ourselves appropriately. But more than that, like, we can do more than just one-off, one-on-one tutorings. We can do big group classes, and we can give them individual intention within those classes as well.
That's really interesting, yeah, especially if anyone has any experience, particularly in more institutional demand, especially from the public schooling system. One of my questions is going to be what your thoughts are about the current funds available through public schooling systems for tutoring services, whether or not you seeing that getting any better or any worse, or what your experiences have been with it.
I don't have public school, but private schools.
Yeah.
So I noticed the same thing. It's what's driving the demand, I guess, in a sense. So when it was test prep, it's people that are trying to get ahead, in a sense, or a school looking at a parent and saying, your child's not where they need to be, there's a consequence that's upcoming if they don't get there. to me, most of that has vanished because that's like unseemly in light of the fact that it's not their fault. But what has replaced it is institutions looking at it with funds and saying, these students are behind, it's our obligation to make sure that they catch up, as opposed to it being the family's obligation to catch them up. So we're noticing, like, when many schools come to us where we ran a process like this, use data to identify where they're struggling, create a plan to help them ameliorate the lacking skills, and then deploy private one-on-one tutoring to get them up to level. You know, and that's been happening more and more. Where students failed a class, and they're just starting to introduce that possibility. You know, because I think for a long time, for maybe a year and a half, you couldn't fail. But now, student failed the class. How do we get the student up to levels? So that's been there. I don't know how long that's gonna continue, and when it's gonna go back to the family's responsibilities to identify where their child's at and to get them up to speed. But I've noticed, a lot from the institutions.
And you work quite a bit with private institutions, right? You work with Rabbi Beda, who we heard from earlier. How do you find working with them? So my understanding of it is that it's quite disparate and it's quite separated out. Each institution does their own thing. Is there any cohesion that they have organizations of private schools and independent schools? Should they be getting involved in tutoring? Should they be negotiating contracts? Or are you happy to do it on a school-by-school basis?
Yeah, it's been school-by-school basis. Every school has different needs. We like customizing to schools. And so it also lets us build products. So the way that we kind of approach it is we go into the conversation, and you're talking to an administrator. He's been doing it for a long time. He has goals. What are his goals, and how could you be a part of it? His goals is X, Y, and Z. Oh, that's cool. We'd be able to build out this. And then you just go to the next administrator and say, oh, here are the things that I've done. And they're like, oh, I love this. I want to do this one. And so you start to zero in on what they need. Needs are similar, but it's not like coming top down or anything like that.
Sure. So you're happy enough with the current system that it's that they're separated out?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anyone else who wanted to hop in on any of those? Irvi?
I think with public schools, like, we get approached by public schools a lot nationally. And it's really hard because they're driven by different things. So like in Texas, public schools in San Antonio, for example, are some of their funding depends on how their students perform on the SAT or the PSAT. There was one district that came to us because they just decided they wanted to have the highest number of national merit scholars ever in I don't know, they had like some lofty goal, and it was like, okay, but then they were like, if we provide test prep to our school, we have to provide it to all 6,000 students. So we want to do that at like $10 per person. It's like, okay, but we can't, we want to deliver real results, so we can get that contract, but it's not going to be worth it for us. And also it's not going to deliver the actual results. So for us, if we're not going to get those scores up, we're not going to do it. So it always comes down to funding with the public schools for me. We've tried to work in certain ways where we said, like, let's pick a smaller group. So if your goal is National Merit Scholarship, all 6,000, maybe we don't start there. Maybe we start with a smaller group, achieve those goals, and you get more funding next year, then we can, grow from there. So we try to like customize our approach, but every public school that has come to us, whether it's in New York or Texas or wherever it is, has a different goal, but funding is always low. But like different plans for what they're trying to achieve, and different gaps that they're trying to fill. We do, like, a lot of times do the diagnostics, and even in a charter school, I think you guys worked there too, but a different charter school that we worked at, their students were severely lacking in math, like really lacking, and turned out they don't have a math teacher for their 11th grade. Like, the person quit, so they didn't have a math teacher in 11th grade. So we were like, we can't do test prep right now. We have to teach them math today. Because they don't know it, and that's fine, we'll do it, but you guys need to lower, your expectations. I'm windy, but my point is just everybody has a different goal, and we ended up not working with that charter school eventually because they were like, well, we want 100% of our students to cross the college readiness benchmark. Yeah, so do I, but then you need a math teacher, right? So we're like, we can't do this, so we just backed off and lost a whole bunch of money, but
that's
for the right reason.
Yeah, so as far as you're concerned with public allocation of funds to tutoring, it's just about providing sufficient amount of money to the school, and then they do with it whatever they do with it. they make it work however they make it work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I can talk a little bit
Yeah,
more
please.
about New York public schools. I mean, there's there's a few programs to fund tutoring. Like if a kid gets suspended, for example, or a kid's sick for a while, the state will pay for private tutoring. There's a number of companies that provide those services. For public schools, it has to be, the tutor has to be a state certified teacher, and the rates are sort of prescribed and they're quite low. So it's hard to find like good quality people who are going to work for, $40 an hour tutoring, right? So there's definitely a mismatch, I think, in funding for private tutoring. The other thing with schools that we found is like teachers unions and teachers tend to be really protective over like academic tutoring, right? So if you say, look, what you really need is like someone to teach your kids math, the school tends to be really protective over that. And it's like, well, that has to be, you can't teach our kids math. Like you can teach our kids for the SAT because that's not part of our curriculum, but you can't teach our kids like algebra. And so I think there's some real, like, at least with public schools, there's some battles to be fought there that perhaps, as a more organized industry, we might be able to have some more success fighting, but we're not there yet.
Cool. That's really interesting. There's loads more I'd like to come back to on that, but I think in the interest of time, we should probably hammer on. We might get more in questions anyway. On a related note, though, and it has come up, so you mentioned there it's very difficult to get a tutor to do a good job for someone on $40 an hour. And similarly, we had a point earlier on, I think that was you, Sam, wasn't it, that when you're young, you don't envisage growing up to be an SAT tutor. It's not a thing. It's doctor, lawyer, astronaut, dinosaur tamer, all those. And this is something that has come up for us in previous events, is there seems to be a perception among tutors and among the general population that like when you grow up, you don't become a tutor. When you're in university and you have a couple hours free in the evenings, you can do it as a side hustle and make some bank that way, but it's not a job. So one of the things that we've discussed in previous occasions was, how do you address that? How do you make it more attractive to people? Say, you can earn money, you can progress in this as a career. Is that something that any of you have come across?
Yeah, I think the weirdly, like the pandemic was the best thing for this, because people got used to virtual education in a way that they weren't before. And so a lot of the tutors that I think would have left decided not to leave because they could just teach from home and still do whatever else they were doing. So I think I was talking about this with you. A lot of our teachers and tutors are actors by trade.
Oh, really?
So the tutoring becomes like almost a full-time gig until they get there as an actor, and it's a hard job to get into. Maybe not dinosaur tamer or panel leader, but the remote education has made it so much easier for us to retain educators than we had before, and I think it helps them continue to follow their passion. Like, the people I want to be tutors are the ones that love doing it. Like, if this is just a side thing to make money, I mean, that's fine if you do a good job, but the ones we want are the ones that are passionate about the kids succeeding and getting them there. So, sure, you can pay them more money, but I want the people that are in it for the right reason.
We actually start our tutors at $40 an hour, but we take away a lot of the heavy lifting for them, right? So students are completing their work before they come onto the Zoom class or whatever it is. They've done a lot of the learning or the conceptual learning, et cetera. So at that point, by the time they get to the session with the tutor, it's really coming down to a few questions that they're still struggling with or something like that. But the expectation of the tutor is not to actually have to teach any of those fundamentals, because it's all on our program. So as long as the tutors are utilizing our program, which if they're not, they don't get to work with us anymore, and the data, and they can actually see what's going on, it's actually a pretty simple job for them. And since we have tutoring happening at all weird hours and in the middle of the night and things like that, it's a really great side gig for them. So it ends up working out. What I've noticed is, at least for me personally, I don't hire tutors full time for TestRocker anymore, unless they're just tutoring. But I've noticed, like, you know, in the past we were like, oh, this is a great tutor. They're super interested in TestRocker. We should hire them full time to do something else at TestRocker. Bad. Like, it never works. Their mentality is that tutor mentality, and that's amazing, which is what they should be. Like, my mom will always be an educator. I can't try to force her to do anything business related or anything else, because it's just not going to happen. So it's the same thing with the tutors. So either they're acting or they're doing tutoring. But for me personally, like, we start them at 40, but we make their lives really easy, and they want to continue, and they just keep signing up for more jobs. And every time through TutorCruncher, it makes it really easy for them to just press click and then get accepted for a job. So we made it efficient. So we're starting with 40. We'll see what happens.
That's very interesting. One of the suggestions that has come up in previous events that we've done has been introducing a level of progression to the career through training and qualifications. So I hear this conversation, it's been happening a little bit so far today already. It's happening more in the UK, I think, and a few other countries, about introducing more standardized qualification or even just internal qualification to recognize tutor progression through different levels. I don't think anyone is really there yet, at least that I know about. But tying that in with a career progression to make tutoring look like a more, proper, long-standing job. Does anyone have any thoughts on that, or any training programs or qualifications that you've rolled into your own?
No, I haven't found that it's so feasible to have people stay for that long, and so, like, at first you were like trying to hold on to people, and then I just realized, okay, it's going to constantly turn over. The passion is there, I find, more at first anyway. Like, if someone's tutoring 30 hours a week for 6 years, I don't know, it seems unlikely that they're going to be so passionate about it. So just focusing on the training resources and on the funnel of bringing in new staff. So we're constantly hiring. We built out like a training course where they submit videos of themselves teaching and things like that. That way we're able to constantly bring new people in, and hiring young, because otherwise the salaries, there doesn't seem to be that much room. And accepting that as reality has been, I think, most helpful for us.
So the turnover cost seems really high generally, right? So it's all about bringing that down, I guess, either through streamlining the turnover or ideally having people hang around for longer. But sorry, Sam?
Yeah, one of the lessons we've learned, so we used to do, you take on a certain number of students and your salary goes up and up and up, and we charge people more for those tutors. But what inevitably happens is they price themselves out, and so then they get a lot less work, and then we lose them. So, like, we had to actually scale back on a program like that because it just meant we lost the great tutors because they were just too expensive.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think for us, like, financially, there's a cap, right? So say we're selling private tutoring ours is currently at $18.99 for, 18 hours or something like that. So of that, a certain cut is going to go to the tutor, and then a certain cut is going to go to just maintenance and all of that. So we have to stay afloat as well, right? So there is a ceiling in terms of how high you can go, but there are infinite jobs that you can take on. So I would say for us, though, the training is really important and the constant retraining. And then we do recognition bonuses. So depending on results, or depending on how, if a tutor has completed a certain number of sessions or things like that. So we have recognition bonuses that go out to tutors for retention purposes. We're trying to keep them retained. It's always more work every time you have to hire a new person and then train them and then go through the whole cycle again. And then we also do quality control. So we have a team under our chief academic officer who, do sampling of the sessions. Because we're on Zoom, we can record everything. So we don't have to live sit in a session and watch what's happening, but we can quality control. So we actually watch the Zoom sessions and then see, did the tutor do the notes? Did the tutor do all of the things that are supposed to be done? So that all helps in helping them get those recognition bonuses and then retraining as needed.
I guess we have probably a bit of a different experience, and I think part of it is just from not being in the city. So we do pour a significant amount of resources into individual tutor training to try and get the quality there. And we charge a lot, and the the conversation that we have with a lot of parents is, you're hiring a professional. It's like hiring a professional services firm. It's not unusual if you're hiring, a B2B consulting firm, you're paying rates that are, exorbitant by tutor standards, right? If you're hiring a law firm, you're paying hundreds or, sometimes 4 figures an hour, right? For professional services. Our tutors are highly qualified individuals, and we pay them pretty well, and we bill them out at a pretty high rate, and we tend to retain people for quite a while by building that skill set and by building that sort of relationship. And then, as for the sort of pricing themselves out range, we actually don't charge different tiers. We do keep it flat. What tends to happen is once a tutor sort of gets to a certain level, that tutor starts try to leverage that tutor's talent by training other tutors. Sounds like a bit of a pyramid scheme, maybe it is, but you're sort of, once a tutor gets to be a certain seniority, that tutor's skills are best suited often by training other tutors, right? So, and sort of passing it along that way. But I do think some kind of professional certification, if it was recognized, would be helpful, I think, to provide, just a barrier to entry into the business, but also, recognition on behalf of clients that, hey, you're hiring a professional, right? This isn't the same as hiring, your neighbor's son to come over for an hour and help your kid with math, right? This is a professional who's gone through training, who, is coming in at a much higher level than that. So a little bit of a different take. But yeah.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. And I won't go into too much detail about this, but we have had other people mention in previous events as well about suggestions for making tutors a little bit more professional, which also address things like bringing in kids who are out of the fold and who are a bit left behind, of introducing standardizations, the same that you get in law and things around pro bono work and like progressing to certain levels, and that being standard to offer pro bono work and not to children who are more left behind. Just an interesting thought. Whether or not someone wants to come into it, you're absolutely free to or not to. Generally speaking, though, that kind of covers everything I'm really meant to touch on. The last little thing.
I did have one.
Yeah, please, Irby.
So,
yeah.
I mean, just to be clear, like, we're not hiring the high school kid like around the corner or anything like that. Like, we hire very senior professionals, but the thing is though that when you're trying to create a very large, like, scalable business or a global business, right? So I went to a fancy schmancy high school because of my dad's job. Great. Even within that high school, not every teacher was the best teacher I've ever had. So how do you make sure that you're getting high quality professionals every time you hire them and they're the best possible tutor for our business, because we're online? I think for us, we struggled with that. Like, even if we pay them $100 an hour, $150 an hour, like, I just think that in scaling, you kind of hit a wall at some point in the types of professionals and the number of best teacher evers that you can hire, right? So we hit that. Like with my mom, she was a phenomenal tutor. She could only tutor so many people. If I could clone her, I would. And so what I created was TestRocker, which was the closest thing to that. Now in our situation, the tutors are not necessarily the best educator ever, went to Harvard, etc., but they are able to facilitate learning in a really good way because our platform is so strong. So whether it's the tutor or whether it's the platform, the learning needs to happen in some way, right? So for us personally, our dependence is more on our platform, which is why it's this, we're able to do that in London or India or here or wherever it is. But if we were doing, more of a localized thing, then yeah, we have to have those excellent tutors to actually teach, because we wouldn't necessarily have the platform. So it just depends on that. That's why it's so interesting, because every tutoring company is so different, right? And some people are just one-stop shops, and then others are doing local, and some are doing global. So it's just an interesting perspective. We rely more on the platform than we do on the people.
Yeah, that was a lovely little tagline about I'd clone my mother if I could, but I couldn't, so
I
instead of
I wouldn't clone my mother. I would clone her as an educator. I would not clone my mom. Nobody needs more of that.
Tell you what, I might just ask one little quick question, then we'll do a Q&A. Yeah, last little quick question, and also something that I think a little community gathering like this is very helpful for. And maybe your answer to this is I don't know, or it's not relevant to me. Regulation of the tutoring industry. It's something that's come up in a lot of other countries. And generally speaking, we found that the US is less regulated in most things than other places are. That's not a surprise to you. Is there any regulation? Is there anything like sales tax? Or, I mean, tutoring industry is generally pretty gig economy adjacent, if not just straight up gig economy. So are there any of those kind of concerns that you could see coming down the track that groups like ourselves should start talking about?
There should be, but there isn't.
I mean, if they work more than 40 hours a week, then they're full time. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. No answer to that is a very good answer.
I mean, just on that, at least what our accountant explained is like if you're providing training materials, anything like that, you're basically, it's a W-2. It's no longer an independent contractor. So, I mean, all of our staff's W-2. That's probably the only regulation is like on the payroll side of things and workers' comp and insurance and all that stuff, but.
Yeah, and the reason I asked the question is not to have any answers to it, but I just think when you have a group of tutoring company owners and operators in one room, if regulation is not mentioned at all, then you're missing a trick. So we mention it now so that next year when we mention it, it's not a surprise. Perfect. All right, I think that brings the panel discussion part to an end, but we can open up for some Q&A now if anyone has some questions. And yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. So Irvi touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering for people who have mostly remote tutors, how you encourage retention with people who you're not like seeing and interacting with face to face. So I know you had mentioned you have like some kind of incentive, like financial incentive. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing like what that is, but also if anyone has any additional ideas, I would love to hear anything you have.
Barbara, we give the panel a chance to. Sorry, you might.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you on the side what I honestly don't even remember what it is because our board keeps changing everything a lot. My dad is also on the board. This is when I say board, I mean like mom, dad, and then a bunch of other people who we're not related to. Also, I would not clone my father. But one of the things we started doing, like just for our team, like full-time team as well, is random events that people can sign up for, like virtual events, to try to keep things because test prep is not fun. Like nobody wants to talk about test prep. So we try to do, like we did a wine event where we invited like certain tutors and then certain sales folks, because we have a lot of sales team members as well. And it was all on Zoom, but the wine was like delivered to their homes. And then we all did like a wine tasting together and got to know each other. So we try to do different events like that virtually. It is important as a team, like just trying to, because I'm not going to fly everybody to New York City and then do a full event here all the time. So this is more, we're able to do it more frequently. And then recognition, like just sending them stuff to their homes, like test rock or swag or whatever it is, a coffee mug, like just even small things. If they've been doing a good job, I think it's really important. So with us, we try to do things like that.
Yeah, adding on, we did a Halloween contest, costume contest, like virtually, and we had a bunch of tutors show up, and they were all dressed up in different outfits, and some people did impressions, and it was just, it was a lot of fun. But to your point, I think recognition is the key. It doesn't have to be money. It's just even kind words. Like, I try to make it like a point to meet with every tutor about once a quarter, just to talk to them and see how they're doing. So I think it matters to people to know that they're not just a cog, but they're part of a company and a family and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So in 2014, I built Mentor.com, which was the first sort of Uber for tutors. We had 400 tutors when I built it. We put them all in Slack, and we had a community organizer that built a community, and they loved each other for several years. We actually had 2 get married. And when the pandemic started in March when it started, March whatever, 2020, I had to hire 100 tutors really quickly for Vivi, which signed a deal with New York Presbyterian Hospital. We provided 1,000 families who were children of New York hospital frontline workers' children, and we were doing over 1,500 sessions a week. And so we've kept all of those tutors. We've scaled the 100 back to about 50 now because of obvious financial implications, but they love each other in Slack. Well, I mean, first of all, we do give out prizes. I announce things all the time. That's where we do weekly professional development where I do workshops and drawings and things like that. But we also put up things like, hey, today is wine day, what's your favorite wine? And I have someone who does that on a daily basis. I put up polls all the time. And we get a lot of participation, and they don't feel tutoring. I've been doing it here in the city for 15 years myself. It's very isolating. You are on an island, and these people, I've got tutors in Wisconsin and Denver and all over in Florida, and they're getting paid 30, 40 bucks an hour, but to them, if they're getting 20 an hour, which goes back to they're all of ours are employees. They had to be because of all the law changes. We couldn't, have problems with that. So if you tell somebody where to be and what time to be somewhere, they're an employee, and you can't get around that. And so it is something everybody has to be cognizant of here, especially in New York State. And some states like California are really strict. But I'm happy to speak with you about the Slack thing because I get a lot of I'm at home working from home most of the time, and I'm isolated. I'm like sitting here going, wow, I'm around real people, not my child. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Thank you. I've gotten so much, and I just met Dick Barnett the other night. Did you go to the premiere?
I wasn't at the premiere, but he had his big luncheon.
I got to talk to you, but that guy, I mean, it's amazing you're working for that foundation. What an amazing man. The new documentary's out. So anyway, I'll talk to you later. All right. Who wants this?
I just want to make a comment about the W-2s versus the 1099s because I was forever on 1099s, and just year after year it seemed to work, and I was really happy. I recently changed because I thought my luck might run out, and I do know someone in our industry whose luck definitely ran out, and she said, the worst year of her life. She eventually won the case, but it was every tutor had to document something. She had to document a million things. The lawyers involved. And I don't know really what's going on in New York State in regard to the legislation or what you're what you're talking about exactly legally. But I will say, it's costing me a lot more money. I don't know exactly how much because TutorCruncher does all the other stuff. I don't even look at it. But if you've been lucky, I'm someone that takes chances, but for some reason, I'm like, you know what? My luck's going to run out. And I switched right over. Well, I thought about it for like 5 years, but I did switch over to W-2s recently, so be careful.
Why do you feel like you need to be lucky to have 1099s?
Because it's totally illegal. That's the fine line, exactly. And we were talking earlier, if you instruct your tutors by a time, by really almost anything that we're all doing, it's illegal. Yeah. I mean, I know what I'm doing is I tell them what time, I tell them the address, I do all the scheduling. A lot of companies don't, but there's still a fine line. Even if you're doing less than me, it's still a very fine line. And besides the government auditing you, I mean, I've had tutors that don't realize they're 1099s. You cannot file for unemployment. And every once in a while, someone will go in and file. It's amazing. Every time I get that letter in the mail, so-and-so filed, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to find out I'm doing 1099s. And it wasn't even the poor person's fault. They just weren't thinking. They went to file for unemployment. So, yeah. That's what I want to say.
And just to add a general note about that, you're all the experts on how these things work in New York, and the few of you are in New Jersey and stuff. But to whatever extent TutorCruncher can help with setting up a software process which enables tutors to have full control over their pipeline and have clients book with them directly, and you just kind of sit in the background. We've already done a lot of that. We're progressively doing more of that. And if you think that there's more that we need to do in order to let you use 1099s instead of going W2 or whatever, just come and talk to us. I'm not going to make it a whole thing, but just let us know. We're always happy to have those chats. Perfect. Any more questions, either like statements or questions to the panel or anything? Tom, yeah?
You mentioned you quality assure your tutors to like look at the lessons and see basically how make sure that the lessons are good quality. To the whole panel, do you all do that, or is that just yourself, Urvashi? And also, how do you find that those quality assurance checks go? Are they normally, I mean, is it always good, or do you find actually there's quite a lot of bad apples that you, that you need to get through?
No, I'll answer the second part of it. No, they're pretty good, actually. Not every single one is perfect, but we rate them. So there's a very tight rating system in our company, like for the last few years, like standardization and automation has been like what I sleep, breathe, eat, everything. So we standardized our quality control process, and we rate them, and that's shared with them from the beginning when they're hired, and then also just the whole way along. We keep reminding them. Most of them are actually, so it's a 5-point scale. Most of them are in the 4 and 5. If they're in the 3, then they go into kind of a remedial thing. If it's a 1, you're just going. But we've never had that. So if they're at a 3, it's because of something that went wrong in one of the different buckets that we have. So it could have been like giving the student clear next steps on what they were supposed to do, or not utilizing our platform as much as we wanted them to, and they were kind of going off on their own tangent. So we do remedial training for that. If it's a 3, we're at 4 or 5, great, and then it's shared with them. So yeah.
Similar. So a chunk of our tutoring is done online, so the Zoom stuff's all recorded, the same as hers. We have a we're like the same thing. Yeah. Well, we have a standard form that we use. It's 3-point scale, not 5. So it's different. But in person, we have program managers that will go, like when we do institutional classes, they sit in the back, and they do usually one in the beginning, one toward the end. And that way we rate our teachers, give them the feedback. And if they got a 1, they're not a good teacher for us. Although, why did we hire them, right? No, we do weekly trainings with all of our different teachers, so we try to really hold a high standard for quality.
Oh, you guys are nice. Sorry.
There you go.
I have a question. How many people here do their own scheduling versus having your tutors use like TutorCruncher? Do your own scheduling. Obviously, the larger companies, you don't do your own scheduling. The tutors do it because you wouldn't be here. But does anyone do their own scheduling? Meaning you track every tutor. And
the administrators of the business versus each
teacher.
Yeah.
Anybody do that?
Manually or with a program?
Either way.
What do you mean by track?
Yeah, I think we
Schedule them. So and so wants 5 o'clock on Thursday. Who takes care of that? The tutor? And what's your checkup process on that? Like, how do you know that tutor's showing up and is where they need to be and the job's complete?
So basically what we do for the preliminary, what we call the pairing process, when you start to set up a tutor with a parent, so the parent will come to us, do an inquiry, and they'll say, we want Thursdays at 5. I'll reach out to the team, I'll find someone who can accommodate Thursdays at 5, and then we do a formal email connecting the parent with the tutor, with our program manager on it as well, and me. And from there, we're hands off, and the tutor follows that schedule and that consistency. We don't use Tutor Country, I'm so sorry, I'm just gonna rip that Band-Aid off. We use we might. Yeah. We use Tutor Panel, but what I do is that every week I look through the tutor's calendar to make sure that those lessons are happening on a consistent basis. And the second that that has dropped off, I'll alert the program manager or one of the partners, and then they will go from there. So like the quality control is really, I'm kind of doing that. But there are like cases, of course, where a family's like, oh, our schedule changed. And we have a lot of families like that where they'll be like, well, for these 3 months we can do this. And then the summer is like a rodeo and we can do this or this or this. Yeah, for a massive change.
We will hear from a parent.
Yeah,
immediately.
we hear from them immediately.
I think we're probably much smaller than a lot of the other agencies here. I'll just say real quick, we're not tiny, but we're not enormous, and so we have really strong relationships with these families. Obviously, if a new family comes down the pike and they're just starting, but we have really long conversations about their kids' personality and disposition and the right fit, and so they will call. I mean, if a tutor's late running 5 minutes, they're like, what's going on? So we usually just get a call to the direct office right away. And on Saturdays and Sundays, I work Sunday through Thursday. We just try and make sure we always have coverage because we have tutoring going on all week. So we just speak with them directly. And sometimes a teacher does forget or something or there's an emergency. But
Usually the family's pretty immediate. We did have like one very stressful case where a tutor just like went off the grid and we still don't know what happened to him, and that's fascinating. That was a fun month. But we heard from the family immediately, and then I immediately was like, all right, we'll get coverage for all of your lessons, like we'll fill that in, and we were able to establish coverage pretty immediately.
And
so
we have a really strong team. We have a team that's been with us for years, so we know these teachers really, really well. And we're always hiring too, but a lot of our teachers have been with us for a long time, so we can really trust that we trust them. We have their word, and
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, one other question for you guys. Do you use templates for your 3 and 5? Your templates for your specific questions. What did you do? Give a summary of the lesson. How is the child progressing? It's a form.
Yeah. We use a standard form with standard questions, and even the scoring scale is defined on the form. So like what a 1 means versus what a 2 means versus for
Interesting.
The 3. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What do you guys do? Is it me, and this might be the dumbest question I've ever asked, but maybe there's not dumb questions, just dumb people who ask them. But basically, the summer, I mean, you lose, there's so much attrition. It feels that all of a sudden we're losing, like 20% of our caseload. Is every day I'm getting drop. And I know they'll restart in late August, September, but I mean, is it worth marketing the summer slide concept and summer learning loss and all that right now, or is it just something you call it the famine part of the feast and famine?
What do you sell? What kind of courses?
We virtual one-to-one tutoring. Again, we have about 200 clients, and we're down 30 or 40 within the past 3 weeks because my own daughter paused her tutoring. You know what I mean? Without telling me, right, with my tutors. But anyway, yeah, so I mean, we're just one-to-one tutoring, and a lot of the families seem to correlate it directly with school. And I try to say, well, kids experience summer learning loss and all that, but it's like the parents are just, no, they need a break. I don't know. I'm just spitballing
I mean,
here.
for us in test prep, June is one of our bigger months in sale. Oh, you're nodding too, huh? All right. Yeah, so it's one of our bigger sales months because people have put off their test prep because they were doing all their other stuff, which is also very important stuff. So they're able to dedicate more, or they thought they could wing it without test prep this whole time, and then their test scores just came out and they're very sad. So now this summer they're going to get their kids' scores up. Yeah, so yeah, I think for test prep and the non, school year academic stuff, the summer is a good time for them. And also a lot of the 10th graders, like the early starter 10th, people are just finishing their 10th grade. They're kind of starting to think about this as well. So we're getting a lot more of that parent group now. We do all our Google ads and stuff, so that's where our people are coming from.
Yeah, I get test prep and college advising are big over the summer, like rising seniors getting started with essays and putting the finishing touches on their resumes, all that kind of stuff. We do a lot of placement for like summer jobs and internships for our advising students, like making sure that they get in the right program so that it you're not wasting that time. But academics, like tutoring over the summer, is a tough sell. That's like, I think I was selling something. It's like ice cream in the winter. You just got to close shop and, wait for the heat.
I do. Sorry, I'm going to get shouted at for going way above the time here. But I have a question just very quickly from right to left in 100 or less words. Where do you? How does the tutoring industry need to change going forward? What's the tutoring industry going to change like in the next 5 years?
Why do I have to start? I think the biggest hole and the biggest niche for the industry is this. Like the industry itself, I think needs to be mature, right, and become less isolated. There needs to be more dialogue between professionals, between companies doing the same thing versus tension and isolation.
I don't have anything. I don't know. What do I have to do? Predict how the industry is going to evolve in the next 5 years?
You're on the panel. You're automatically an expert.
I don't know. I think it'll pivot. Like it's a pretty flexible. Like even here, like everyone just talked about what all they did during COVID, right? So we don't know what's happened. Like we didn't know COVID was coming, but everybody kind of seems to have figured it out. I think open dialogue is really nice. I do find it interesting how like everybody here seems to have the same goals, right? We want good outcomes for students and we want them to succeed. And I just wish there was a way for everybody to kind of come together and do that together. Like, I mean, I've talked to other companies about doing roll-ups where we just band together. There's so many small groups. Like what if we all banded together and then the student could get the right service that they need from the right group? So if it was like a tutoring group. So I mean I have dreams of that someday in some way. And it would also be so nice to have more resources at our fingertips. Like like if I could have a bigger team or more people or whatever it was, that would be so nice. So we could do more. So my hope is that someday there could be like little, I don't know, rolled up groups of us together making a difference. Not in the next 5 years. And cloning. My mom. And your mom. And your mom. You can clone everybody.
Please don't clone my parents. That would be... I guess the short answer I'll think of from a test prep perspective, the SAT going digital, people are going to need to be a lot more comfortable with online education and then just using online resources to prepare. Quick answer.
Oh, next year, 2023, so we have a lot of students in India. Like a large part of our business is also in India. 2023, they're doing the SAT for the first time digital in India. So our students, current students, because they're proactive, are actually going to be taking this digital one. So we're like, yeah.
We're really perpetuating the have-nots here in this city. I mean, there's $200 to $600 an hour tutors, and there's a real lack of equity and there's a lot of inequality. And I don't know the answer. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. I can't go to the Upper West Side and do what I do for, I just can't. I can try to, again, it's a problem in this city. It's just and the rents have gone up 30-40%, so everybody's like stretched. I did love what one of you said about, you are hiring a professional to come to your house just like you would a plumber and all that. We have to have that mindset that there's value in parents paying for their child to be tutored. It might hurt, it might sting, but it's sort of every kid needs one-to-one. Somehow we have to make that happen. It's got to be, yeah.
There are a lot of like foundations groups that are doing really great work, and I just wish it could be bigger and more. But I think it was brought up very quickly. Sorry, I'll stop talking after this. But it was brought up very quickly about the whole test optional, SAT being optional, and I think it was the biggest mistake, quite honestly, that universities could have made by going test optional. If you don't want to look at the score, go test blind. How many of them went test blind? Not a lot, right? So by going test optional, you've created so much confusion. You're creating false hope for students by saying, oh, now everybody can apply to whatever, NYU or whatever it is. Now the poor NYU admissions people have doubled the applications. They used to get 60,000, now they're getting 100,000. how are they gonna sort through, right? And MIT, I think, put it very nicely in their article about why they're now requiring the SAT again, and it's because they need the information. Like, GPAs are inflated. Everybody has a 4.0, like everybody, and so how are you comparing GPAs? You can't compare GPAs because how can everybody have a 4.0? So then you're looking at their extracurriculars. Are the underserved students really thriving in their extracurriculars right now? Like, not necessarily, right? They don't have the same resources as private students who, or whatever, financially sound families who have like tennis lessons and soccer and everything like that. So actually the divide has become even more apparent. The essays are no good because you read the essays. Actually, even the students who have the money, their essays are no good either. So hopefully your college advising stuff, we don't do that, but hopefully that's helping them. But like the essays are no good. So what is it? So I think that just touching on that whole optional thing, I just think it was a huge mistake. And I hope that they just go one way or the other, like pick it or don't pick it, but don't go in the middle, making it awkward for everybody.
This is anecdotal because our community is smaller, but what we saw is that the students who submitted test scores got in at a higher rate again and again. So like this test optional thing, what does that actually mean in practice? And we had kids that the students that submitted scores got in at much higher rate, much higher. And we had some candidates who, my one partner who managed this aspect of the business, he felt like there was some students who didn't submit scores that were stronger candidates that did not get their top choices. So we need to be honest and do better about the reality of these tests and the dangers and the risks of really just hanging our hats on these data points. And I don't mean to say MIT should go test optional. Absolutely not, right? There's certain institutions that really need students who can hang, but I guess while I've got the mic, I'll just also say I hope that the industry moves in a more holistic direction, in a more empowering direction. I think it is. I think I feel that from everybody here today. We have some Brooklyn community tutoring companies that we're sort of friends with or neighbors with in Brooklyn, and I just feel like the narrative that we're constantly telling young people is that it's about their grades and their output and all these external things, how productive they are, is what they're hanging their value on. And I really think that we're getting into a dangerous place with that in our society. I won't go on a whole existential spiel about social media and you got to be the skinny enough and hot enough and all the things, but I just think that we're seeing more kids in crisis than ever right now, and these students have every right to feel so proud of what they've accomplished, and they feel the complete opposite. And it is very scary to watch, and we're really trying to separate the students' value from their grades and their test scores. We want to support them to do as well as they can. We're never going to cater or handhold. We want to challenge them, but we want them to feel good because they tried really hard and they got an 88. You got a 78 last week. That's still really good. We're really trying to change the narrative here with our community, and I think it's been having a big impact on some of our students who are struggling the most. But I think a lot of kids really need that, and there's the anxiety thing is becoming a real problem.
It goes back to Rabbi Beta's point earlier on, right, about introducing values into education, and I thought that he made that point really well. Hopefully that lands quite a bit.
Can I ask one final
please.
question?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you guys. This has been incredibly enlightening, and it's nice to be around an audience where you can kind of speak your truth and get a lot of different, tidbits of information. And you're so correct. I remember being in Stanford College admissions and being in that boardroom and sort of the admissions process. If you guys want to know what happens behind the scenes, you're more than welcome to talk to me. We'll grab a coffee after this. But my question, actually, sort of going back to standardized test prep, is what, and maybe because we might be running out of time, in 30 seconds or less, what steps are you guys taking with respect to the California test rollout, where they are moving away from the SAT and ACT, and they are now creating their own formalized testing system?
I mean, just to California, what we've seen at least is in that particular market, a shift towards things like APs, where now those tests have become more important. So there's still this need for a test, and I think it's just shifted away from the SAT. TBD what they're going to fill that gap in with in a few years. I think they're just going to make their own SAT and spend a few $1 billion. But I don't know. I'm totally, it's all conjecture. I mean, I'm not sure what they're going to end up doing. It's a big mess over there. I will say this is also totally anecdotal, but if I have a student come in with straight A's in the most advanced math class and then come in and land a 540 on an SAT math, The SAT's right, like almost all the time. I know that's kind of anecdotal, but the tests I've found like are probably a little bit more meaningful, and there's still just this, it's become highly politicized. There's just this stigma against it. One more little anecdote. We look at a lot of like career fairs and stuff. A lot of the college, like if you go to Columbia's Teachers College, for example, you look at their career fair, there's a big banner on their website saying no test prep companies. Like, we'll hire teachers, like schools, you're all welcome. If you're a test prep company, like, please don't show up. So I think there's just this like stigma against our profession and against these tests, and there's something that's there needs to be like a dialogue that's not taking place right now. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, and the college consulting, which is coming to fill the place, is far less equitable, because it's way worse. So you talk about the essays, that's going to be less. The notion that subjective things are going to be better than objective things, obviously, is silly. I preach to the choir with that, but the question that I want to pose is, with higher education in general, so this whole race is like a rat race because of higher education. So what grades do I need? What test score do I need? What do my applications need to look like? And how at what point does that break? And do people, like just like a spell, realize that maybe is less necessary than they thought, or that there are free alternatives where they could get the skills that they need to have successful careers, and that you could get the accreditation now also online quickly. So you get a quick accreditation, you get the skill set, you get working, and then, I don't know where things go. So watching higher education sort itself out, I think when they ask me 5 years, that's the more interesting question, and that'll steer. Maybe things will move slower than it seems like they could, but,
I mean, for us, like, since we're doing Google marketing across the entire country, like if California is not on board right now, we'll just market to whoever is, right? And then when there is a test, we'll build it out and we'll get them ready for it. But we're just going where the demand is, and that's what we're doing. But it's always nerve-wracking when change and SAT are in the same sentence, I would say.
Yeah, and hey, I look forward, like, nerve-wracking, but opportunity. Like, when there's change, people don't know what to do and how to prepare. And we've got smart people, like, we're waiting and seeing, I guess, to some degree.
Perfect.
Thanks, man.
All right, yeah, well, I think that draws us to a close. We're still around here for another half an hour, so we'll open up some sandwiches, keep having a chat. We have to 2:30, so full hour, great. Have some teas and coffees.
Yeah.